Hi, everybody. My name is Russell Spatz. I'm an alcoholic, and Russell, to see you guys. And this is Super Bowl Sunday, and so why am I at a meeting? Why am I at a meeting on Super Bowl Sunday? And the reason is I actually used to drink on Super Bowl Sunday, so I figured I better go to a meeting. So I might as well and fulfill my responsibility. And it's good to be here. I've been, I was up in Canada last weekend, and Sheldon, I think, was nice enough to fill in for me. And I understand, I have been told that I think he was supposed to do step 8. And I've been told he fulfilled that responsibility. So I came here thinking I was going to do, well, actually, I wanted to do 8 and 9, but I was told by, I can't remember who told me, I think it was Paul, told me I would be violating the traditions. And I said, well, I like violating the traditions, though. And he was apparently keeping tabs on me, and I said, you shouldn't mush them together. I'm going to mush them together a little bit, So since he did it last time, I'll do a little mushing and talk a little bit about step 8 and 9, and then I'll talk about what I really want to talk about. And I'll talk about why I really want to talk about what I really want to talk about, and I'll talk about the difference. So I haven't found enough to have a drink, and while I'm deep into my 46th year, I think that's it. And so there's been some changes. I've changed a little bit. I'd like to think it's for the better. My wife tells me it's not. It's I've gotten actually worse rather than better. But in any event, so I'm at a point in my life where, for whatever reason, for good or for bad or whatever, I like talking about emotional sobriety. I've had many, many people in my life that I love and that I know have drank or gone the way of depression, even with time. And what happens is a natural progression where I used to do a lot of wet work, a lot of wet work on Relay for 8 years, and going out to detoxes and going out getting people from their apartments and carrying flasks, just in case they go into DTs, and do a lot of work with, not drinking thing, which is, it's still important in AA, right? The not drinking thing. But what happens is you get older, and I can't put a time on it, but somewhere maybe like 25, 30, 35, 40 years, you find yourself, and I'll help a drunk, don't get it wrong, but you find yourself some sort of natural progression where you get a lot of calls from people that have 10, 15, 20, 25 years, 30 years. I guess, I understand, I get that, I understand that. If you got 30 years and you're not happy with your sobriety, and I just want people to know, I know in this crowd there may be people with like 1 year, 1 month, 20 years, 40 years. I want you to know, so you don't get shocked at this, there are people in AA that have been sober for many, many years that are not happy. I know we're all supposed to be rocketed in the fourth dimension of existence, experiencing much of heaven, knowing peace, and the joy of living and all. But let me tell you something. That happens to a very few people. Doesn't happen to a lot of people, and at least based upon what I've seen. And no, a lot of people can become very, very adept at using I'm going to call it the tools of the program, to avoid drinking, but not necessarily avoid feeling sorry for themselves or avoid loneliness or things like that. And so what do you do if you got 20 years or 25 years or 30 years and you're not happy? And you're maybe you're the guy with the longest time in the group. Maybe you're doing a step series. Maybe you're, asked to speak all the time. Maybe a lot of people, what do you do when you got time and you're sort of like keeping it to yourself, You're keeping your feelings. Maybe you don't even know you have these things going on, Maybe you're not even aware. And if you look at, it's interesting, if you look at the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which Bill Wilson wrote when he had like 3.5 years, and I believe God used Bill Wilson. I believe it was divinely inspired. But it's funny how it talks. How they say you can't give away something you don't have and you don't have. It's funny how in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill Wilson talks about what I'm going to talk about now. In a sense, one of the things I'm going to talk about, when he really had no way of knowing what he was talking about. And let me explain to you why I say that. In the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, you got Bill Wilson. You guys, I don't know how many people have more than 3 years. You remember when you had 2 or 3 years? And I'm not putting down 2 or 3 years. But, could you have written the big book? I couldn't have written the big book in 2 or 3 years. I couldn't have written the big book at 20 years. You know what I mean? And he has stuff in there. He prophesizes stuff in there that you could not know unless you had 30 or 40. You couldn't know it. You couldn't know, They say, and I'm not sure he even knew what he was saying. He said there will come a time in every alcoholic's life that will have no defense against the first drink. His defense has to come from a higher power, right? Well, how do you know that with 2 years or 3 years? I guess you know that. You know that it's got. They were very much into, the Lord and the God thing the first 5 years. First 3 years or 5 years, but how do you know that is so true for people with 15, 20, 25, 30? How do you? He writes this thing in the book. There comes a time he talks about. With a former drinker, where he'll say, feel better, look, now the guy's got like 3 years, right? He says, feel better, look better, having a better time. He says, we laugh at such Sally, calls it a Sally, I guess it's a statement. We know he will try the old game again. He's talking like he's got 30 years. There'll come a time and a former drinker says, you feel better, look better, have a better time. We laugh at who's we? There was him and like 3 other people. We laughed. There was him and like 10 people, and they all had less than 3 years. Guy comes and says, feel better, look better. He says, we laugh at that stuff. We know he'll try the old game again because he's not happy with his sobriety. He's talking like he's talking like he's listening to the same guys I'm listening to with 20 years. And we know he'll try it. Soon he'll try the old game again because he's not happy with it. Soon he'll know loneliness as few do. He'll be at the jumping off place. He'll wish for the end. And he's talking about, and then 23 years later, I think it's 23 years later, he publishes an essay called The Next Frontier, Emotional Sobriety, in the Grapevine, where the entire essay is how at around 22, 23 years, he's like taking a deep dive into depression and loneliness, and he's like lost. Then I'm not going to go through the entire essay. You ought to read it, where he's basically talking about he's experiencing in his life at 20, 21, 22 years, what he wrote about when he had 3.5 years. How do you know that he was predicting exactly where he was going to be at 3.5 years, and at 3.5 years where he was going to be at 23 years? And one of the things that you see when you've been around for a long time is, it says our experience, strength, and hope. Well, my experience is not the experience of somebody who's been around 12 months. My experience is not an experience of a guy that's been around 3 years or 5 years. My experience is about somebody who's been watching what's going on here for 45 years plus. My experience is I have experience in watching people with 20 years drink again. My experience is watching people with 30 years commit suicide. My experience is watching people that have a lot of time in deep depression and like just unbelievable stuff in meetings, working the steps and doing this thing. My experience is how when I'm speaking to a group, could be 300, could be 1,000, whatever, I absolutely know. I know, because this is my experience. There's people in that group that have 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years sobriety that are going to be drunk within a year and they don't even know it. I know that's the truth. I know there are people that are suffering that have 10 years and they don't understand. They're like Bill Wilson. They're like, that happened to me at 10 years. At 10 years, I hit a wall. I know that there's another bottom. I know there's a bottom for drinking. I know there's a hitting bottom for drinking. You know how they say we had to find a power greater than ourselves, which would help us with the drinking problem. I know there's a power greater than ourselves they talk about a power greater than ourselves that will solve all our problems. And I know that the big book says very simply, drinking is but a symptom of our disease. That's what it says. Drinking is but a symptom of our disease. It's not even the disease. It's a symptom of our disease. The real disease centers in our mind, not our body. It's like when the guy I sponsored, Tom, called me up early on, and he was like 3 or 4 months sober. The real disease is what we experience after we stop drinking, right? That's when you find out about the real disease. Initially, you're happy, it's wonderful, it's great, and then all of a sudden, one night you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and the demons are coming at you, you know what I mean? And you can't drink, so you got to tough it out. And it's the thinking, it's in our mind, not our body. And so if the drinking is but a symptom of our disease, and you hit bottom on the drinking, what do you do about all the other stuff? You know, what do you do when when you start experiencing the disease? And so, you know, one of the things that I've noticed most of the time I'm dealing with people. I mean, I know how to deal with somebody who has a drinking problem. I know how to talk to them. I know where to point them. I know what to say to them. You know, I know how to assuage them or calm them. I know how to kick them in the butt when they need to be kicked in the butt. I mean, it's not that I can't do it. But at my stage in life, most of my time is spent, sort of shepherding the shepherds or talking to people that have a lot of time, that are still experiencing, because they trust me and they feel there's somebody, you know how it is, how we are. Whether you want to call it intellectual pride or, I don't think it has anything to do with this. I think you want to go to somebody who may have experience that you don't have. So when I have 20 years or 25 years, I want to talk to Ray O'Keefe, who has, 35 years. You understand what I'm saying? I want to say, look, I'm having these problems. What do you think? I want to talk to somebody who's got experience walking through that jungle, that I'm walking through now, that he's already walked through that jungle. And so what I deal with is the dis-ease that centers in my mind, not my body. So I'm not putting down in any way, although sometimes it sounds that way, I'm not putting down in any way the concept, or what AA has sort of like become in my mind, of meetings that have basically to do with not drinking one day at a time. I mean, most of the AA meetings I've been to, the meetings are about, the saying, my sponsor used to say, Russell, the newcomer is the most important person in the group. And I remember absolutely 1,000,000% believing that. I believe that. I'm not sure I don't believe that today in a sense. the most important person in the group. So what they need, because if you're a newcomer, you're like this, I don't care how well you're doing, you could go any second about the drinking thing. And so when I read the big book for the first 5 years, 10 years, I honestly believe as long as you don't drink, you're a success. That's what they told me. As long as you don't drink, you're a success. But as a guy who's been around for 46 years, I'm in my 46th year, I know that's not true. I know that's not true. I know that if you think that if you stop the symptom, the drinking, that's all you have to do, and that's the most important thing. I know that more than likely you will drink again. I know if the only thing you're interested in is, well, at least I haven't drank or I haven't done this, I know you're probably setting yourself up for having a miserable life. I know that somewhere along the line, I think the drinking part laughs at that crap. I think they want people to believe that as long as they don't drink, everything's going to be okay. But the facts are completely opposite. And I just went up in Canada. They had another countdown. I love watching countdowns. And I know the statistics prove this. Some guy told me one of the reasons they know about the drinking and that kind of stuff I'm talking about is how many calls they have for 40-year medallions, how many calls they have for 50-year medallions, how many calls they have for 35 and 30 and 20-year. And you watch a countdown, and between 1 and 20, everybody's sober. You know what I mean? The whole world is sober. And between 20 and 40, like you could shoot moose in the room, you're not going to hit anybody. You know what I mean? I know, and it's not because they all died of a heart attack. Trust me, it's not because of that. It's because a lot of people, when it starts getting, because what happens is the mental and spiritual disease of alcoholism, the thing they talk about that sends in their mind and body, it'll catch up to you. It'll catch up. You can run with this thing and use the tools and do everything. And no matter how bad you feel, no matter how bad the day is, you can use the tools of recovery. Call up your sponsor. Go to a meeting. Go to 15 meetings. Sponsor 10 people. Nothing more ensures sobriety than this. And you can use all the tools of recovery and assuage the concept of drinking and get past the drinking and maybe even feel okay. Put a Band-Aid on it. And you can do that for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. But the law of averages says that you're going to reach a point in the time where, what does it say in the big book? There'll come a time in every alcoholic's life we'll have no defense against the first drink. His defense has to come from higher power. And you know what happens? Bill Wilson said, worldly clamors, mostly within ourselves, block out his presence. And you know something, no matter how much you don't want to drink, I'm going to tell you what never stops. You know what never stops? What never stops? Your desire not to drink may stop. But I'll tell you one thing that never stops. Worldly clamors. Never stops. 24/7, never stops. And all you need is a period of time in your life where the worldly clamors get so great, where they block out his spirit, his presence. And all you need is when those worldly clamors block out his presence and they serve you with divorce papers, or your son or daughter dies, or your wife or husband gets cancer, or you get fired from your job, or you have no money, or how about this one? I like this one. Or a bunch of these things happen at the same time. You're good with one. You can handle one. You might even handle two, but then all of a sudden you get into a car accident and you don't have insurance or whatever it is. And all of a sudden you're drinking and you're going to meetings. And you know how to do a 4-step and an 8-step and all those things. You know what I mean? So I know that somehow with this deal, you got to go way beyond the don't drink and go to meetings deal. And so my calling today, and I've always thought my calling today is to try to help the person who's got time, who's not happy with their sobriety. Now, the interesting thing is whenever I do a meeting basically focused on them, which is going to be a meeting focused on God, because that is the answer. Whenever I have newcomers, there are newcomers that like those meetings. I don't understand it, but there are people that I know everybody thinks that you're killing newcomers. I know everybody thinks if I talk about this stuff, newcomers are going to die. All the newcomers left and they went out drinking. But actually, newcomers come up to me and they start asking me questions because they want a story of weight and death. They want something more than just don't drink. You know, what did Nancy Reagan say? What was her thing?
Say no to drugs.
They want something more than say no to booze. You know what I mean? They need something more than say no to booze. Okay, and this is something more. So in the one, thank you for your help. You know, I'm old. You know, I need. So there's you can read the book. You can read the book, and you can go to meetings, and think that this is all about not drinking, and that's okay. There's a time for that. But there's a time when you read the book and you don't even see the drinking problem. You don't have a drinking problem. You don't even desire to drink, but you have other problems that they're not talking about, or you can't in AA. And so I go to these step meetings, and you know, sometimes it seems like I'm not talking about the steps. You know what I mean? Because I should be talking about not drinking and going to meetings and using the tools and all that sort of stuff. And so here I'll give you an example. And that's not because I don't think not. As a matter of fact, if you can't stop the drinking for 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 15, 20 years, you ain't never going to get to the next part. It ain't never going to happen. But then again, I know that if you stay here and you stop drinking, you're going to reach a point in your life. It may be at 5 years, maybe at 10 years, maybe at 15 years, where the bottom's going to drop out. I know it's going to happen. I want to let you know about it so when it happens, you don't sit there, what's this all about? People may not talk about it. You may not have people with 20 years or 25 years telling you that that's going to happen. They may be given these great drunkalogs, you know, as opposed to faithologs. You may get these great drunkalogs and say, man, that is incredible. It may even help you. It may be part of the tools that help you. But I know you're going to come to your personal situation where the bottom's going to drop out. And the meeting's not going to help. And the sponsor's not going to help. And nothing's going to help. And nothing's going to work permanently for you or anything like that. And you're going to either get to the next level. You're going to either start reading that book a different way, looking at it a different way, because there's 2 books in that book. There is a book that talks about not drinking. It's in a thing called the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, where they talk about not drinking a lot. And then there's another book in Alcoholics Anonymous where they don't talk about drinking at all. All they talk about is God. And it's all mushed together. And if you're a new alcoholic or you got 5 years or 10 years, the only thing you see is the drinking part, the not drinking part. And if you got the not drinking part down, but you have other problems that are eating at you, and you may not even realize you have the other problems until time goes on. See, what has to happen is you got to experience those problems over and over. How long did it take you to realize you had a drinking problem? So I started drinking when I was 15 years old. I came to AA when I was 31. That's 16 years of drinking. Say after 16 years of drinking, I hit bottom. Let me tell you something. It can take 16 years of sobriety before you realize the other problems you have. You may just sort of assume like this is normal, that as long as you're not drinking, it's okay while you're going down the tubes, like Bill Wilson, where you have another problem. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about, you know, which sort of like leads me into the 8th step. I have experienced, and I talk about this at a lot of meetings because it's been my experience. Now, a lot of alcoholics think they're unique. You ever have a feeling like That's one of the great things about Alcoholics Anonymous is you walk into the room and you know that nobody's going to understand you. Nobody will ever understand you. How can anybody understand you? I mean, because you're so nuts. You can't even understand you. And then you come to Alcoholics Anonymous and you hear people talking and you say, I have the same problem. And all of a sudden you see that you're like, you come in here, forget about they don't understand you. They're like twins. Everybody, it doesn't matter. Male, female, black, white, fat, thin. They're all talking about this. And you say, man, that's what she's talking about what I'm talking, and all of a sudden you hear this and you realize that we're exactly the same. That's why we get along. Not because we're perfect, because we're fucking crazy. You know what I mean? And we got the same kind of craziness going on. So, so one of the things I realized after years and years of this is that if I have a crazy thought, something so outrageously crazy, I'm not going to share it with anybody. If you say, I'm in love with a camel. I keep up a sensation about a camel. I want to marry this camel. You know what I mean? 3 guys will walk you over to the bar and buy you a cup of coffee and explain how they too were also in love with the camel. You know what I mean? Somebody's going to understand you. You know what I mean? He says, I can't believe you're in love with the camel too? Yeah, I got a camel at home. Yeah, it's crazy about him, We're going to get married next week, So one of the things I talk about is this concept about treating yourself like shit. Believing that you're a worthless shit and you don't deserve to live. How alcoholics talk to themselves in their mind. How they are constantly having conversations with themselves. I'm such an asshole. I'll never get this thing. I'm talking about 15, 20 years sober. I'm such a loser. Dr. Bob in the last paragraph says, if you're an atheist or an agnostic, have some sort of intellectual pride that keeps us from getting this thing I feel sorry for you, your Heavenly Father will never let you down. And what is intellectual pride? That's being so smart and so sharp, but also being so prideful that you're not going to tell anybody about what's really going on with you. You're just going to keep it to yourself. And therefore, you're your own therapist. You're not even going to tell your sponsor. And even if you told your sponsor, he may not. You're just going to basically say things to yourself like, you're such an idiot. I'm such a loser. And that's the way you talk to yourself. I'm never going to be okay. This is never working for me. I'm such a phony. What is people going to find out? And alcoholics are sensitive. I used to tell my sponsor, I said, well, I'm sensitive. He says, no. He used to say, no, Russ, great artists are sensitive. You're just touchy. Well, whether it's sensitive or touchy, alcoholics are very touchy and sensitive. The reason why we tell people we don't have crosstalk, the Oxford group, where I came from, used to have something called correction, where they would have their meetings, and some guy would say, I'm in love with a camel, or whatever the hell they'd say at these meetings, and they were using the Bible. And then the rest of the group would spend the rest of the time correcting them with scripture, which is fine, for non-alcoholics. But, you start correcting an alcoholic with scripture, he tells you to go fuck yourself. You know what I mean? I mean, he just tells you, it didn't work. It didn't work. They overreact. Alcoholics tend to overreact, get mad, and get upset about stuff. So, we have this little rule. You can't crosstalk. I mean, as much as you want to, you can't crosstalk. Now, I've got to be honest with you. I personally love crosstalking. No, I mean, it's true. I have to be honest with you. I've always loved crosstalking. I think I'm an incredible crosstalker. I think I could basically save the world with my crosstalking. But when you're new, you don't want to be slapped around or anything like that. The key with crosstalking, even if you're good at crosstalking and helping people and you're sponsoring people, is you got to learn how to crosstalk in an undercover way. Some guy says something in the back of the room, and, when it finally gets to you, you say a story or you say something, and it's just, and of course it's brilliant, it's wonderful, but everybody knows it has something to do with what that guy said, which I don't personally believe is a necessarily bad thing. You know what I mean? As long as you're kind and you're doing, I don't think it's a bad thing, but we love to, do that kind of stuff. So here's the problem. One of the things I've realized about these conversations we have with ourselves, telling us how horrible. I remember one guy once said a great line. I stole it from him. He's passed away. I don't think he minds. Johnny Harris. He said, "I was a nothing. I was always going to be a nothing. I used to put something in my body that turned me into an almost. When you're a nothing, almost is top of the world. When in your mind you're a nothing, or you're less than, or you're a piece of crap, or you're not happy with who you are or what you are, and you're telling yourself that stuff, and you're trying to figure out where those voices are coming from, and you turn around, there's nobody in the car but you. There's nobody in the bathroom but you. You know what I mean? That is your reputation with you about yourself. Now, I'm going to tell you something. If you are constantly, repeatedly telling yourself bad things about yourself, just stuff about yourself that if another person said it to you, you'd have to shoot him or hate him. When you constantly find yourself doing that, it's really hard, even if you're not drinking, to live a successful life. It's very hard to live a life where you're living you're experiencing the joy of living. And what I've noticed with alcoholics, because we are thinking we're not that well. That's part of the insanity. And what I've noticed with alcoholics is that we are, I'll say sensitive to make you feel touchy. And the slightest breeze, which may not affect other people, I don't know whether it affects other people or not. Sometimes I have a tendency to think that everybody in this world is alcoholic. There's nobody. The Bible says this great line, there's nothing you're suffering from that isn't common to man. And I've spoken to actually non-alcoholic people. And I've talked to them about the stuff we experience. He says, I've experienced that. They just don't have any meetings to go to. The best they have is maybe church or something like that. They go for the same, the reason they go to church and the reason they do that is for the same reason we go to meetings. Because they've got feelings of fear, insecurity, inferiority, the same stuff. They got the same stuff, but they just can't go to AA meetings. You know what I mean? If they go to an open AA meeting and they come here, they'll say at the very end, a good AA meeting, they'll say, man, I wish they had meetings like that for normal people. You know what I mean? And so, one of the things I've noticed is that we are thinkaholics. We can't stop thinking about ourselves. I love that famous line, let's stop. Enough of me. Enough about me. Heather, let's talk about you. What do you think about me? You know what I mean? It's always about ourselves, When you think about, and you know what happens when you're thinking about yourself all the time? I don't know about you. There's a tendency to think about bad crap about yourself and bad stuff about other people. And when you're thinking about bad stuff about other people, it's because you think somehow, some way, they're doing something to you or they're thinking badly of you. And here's what I've also found. That many times, when I am saying crap to me about me, and I'm indicting me, and I'm telling me I'm such a worthless piece of crap, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, it generally happens at the tail end of either having a fight with somebody or overreacting to somebody or feeling guilty about doing something where they think I'm stupid or I did something stupid or I'm just beating the shit out of myself because I said something or I did something and I'm just talking bad shit about myself. Guilt will cause an alcoholic all sorts of pain. My sponsor used to say, you know, Russ, you know why you feel guilty? I'd say, no. He says, because you are. The worst kind of guilt is when you really actually are guilty and you don't know what to do with it. So you shove it down. You go and sponsor somebody. You go to 15 meetings in a Canary and whatever, and somehow you stop thinking about it. But it's like sitting there. It's like in the archives. You know what I mean? You think it's archive. It's like, you know, one of the stories I tell is when I got a divorce from my first wife, which is a guilt story all in of itself. I had what's called visitation rights with my child. Child was 5 years old. You know, God bless him. And I have a great relationship with him now. And I was supposed to pick him up on a Saturday morning. I told him I was going to take him to the zoo. And he says, going? He says, yeah, I'm going to pick you up on Saturday morning. And on Saturday morning, the night before that, I was out with some gal named Sally and, you know, her girlfriends and everything like that. And on Saturday morning at 7 o'clock, I was getting set to pick up my son. And Sally called me up and said, you know, girls and I going out on the boat. You know, they had a nice boat and everything. He says, we'd like to invite you along. So I'm thinking, now I got a problem. I got the girls, you know, inviting me along to the boat and there's drinking, maybe sex or something like that going on. And then I got my 5-year-old son that I promised to take to the zoo. So I had like a conflict. You understand? Now you guys, I can tell looking at you are what I would refer to as very nice alcoholics. Okay. And I used to think I was a nice alcoholic. Don't get ahead of me now. So I'm having this incredible debate. Sally, the sex, the drinking, you know, the fun, or my son. And I must have debated that for 5 seconds? And then it was anchors away. And now you would think a normal person might call up his son and say, I'm not gonna be able to make it because, my squirrel died or some sort of excuse that we can come up with. But I felt guilty, so I didn't want to call him up. So he just sat there waiting for me. Now I know you guys have never disappointed people or done things like that. So I understand why you would judge me and say you're such a piece of shit. You know, I understand that. And I accept that because I was, you know. And I'm out, and I'm going to tell you something. When you live a life like that, you're going to drink. Trust me. You cannot live your life that way without drinking. You gotta drink, okay? Or else you're gonna blow your brains out. And I'm gonna tell you something. If that's the way you live your life, you're gonna do that. You're gonna do that kind of stuff all the time. And when you live a life where you're disappointed and hurting people and you're living the life of an irresponsible bum all the time, you're going to feel guilty all the time. And I don't care whether you don't drink and go to meetings and do all that sort of, whatever the heck you do, you're going to have this constant chatter in your brain that you're not good enough and you're a phony and you're a piece of crap. And I'm going to tell you something. Not drinking will not make that go away. All it will do is help you see more clearly what a piece of shit you are. You understand what I'm saying? As a matter of fact, the one thing that you want to avoid is sobriety. Yeah. That's when sobriety becomes a real problem. When you live that kind of life. That's when the only life you can live is a drunken life. And you know what happens? If there's, that movie, The Portrait of Dorian Gray, there's a little portrait of you down below, and it's all scarred up and messed up and everything like that, with all the sins and the bullshit you've done. So how are you going to handle that, big shot, with your 10 years sobriety? And you're messing up all the time. And you're having those voices coming at you. But at least you're able to say to yourself, but look at me, I haven't had a drink. I've just picked up my 10-year medallion. And so that's where the tools come in. That's where the 8th and 9th step comes in. That's where they give you these tools of recovery. Where out of the 4th step or an inventory step, you can see who you hurt and what you did, and then you can promptly make amends for what you did. You understand what I'm saying? You can fix it so you don't feel guilty And you don't have to call yourself a piece of shit. You understand what I'm saying? You can do that. They work. They're tools. So then what happens is, for the most part, nothing's ever perfect to you. I don't want you to think it's perfect. Then apparently what happens is you get to a point in your life, they talk about this in the 10th step. I don't want to jump ahead, but I am anyway, where it says you learn how to avoid, what is it, writing. What happens is you get to a point where you learn how to do amends so well and so many times you just hate making amends. And somewhere along the line, it occurs to you that if you don't screw up and hurt people, you don't have to make amends. Now, I'm talking, let me tell you something. This is advanced Alcoholics Anonymous that they don't talk about in meetings. Because at meetings, all they talk about is, I did this and I did that and all that, and they want thumb-sucking crybabies to talk about all our problems, and they say, well, go sponsor somebody, or how many people do you sponsor? Do you have a sponsor? Where they talk about how to, fix it and everything like that, but they don't talk about the advanced stuff. The idea, the concept that you don't have to talk to yourself that way anymore if you don't want to. You don't have to experience that. All you have to do is stop screwing up. And you may say, well, they never say that in the book. Well, I'll tell you what, if you read the 12 and 12, it says, we learn how to practice restraint of tongue and pen. In other words, as you do these things over a period, these tools over a period of years, not weeks, not months, but decades, you somehow get to the point with the help of God, and I believe it's with the help of God, where you don't open up your mouth and say stupid shit. And you don't do stupid shit. And what happens is when you don't say stupid stuff or do stupid stuff, you don't find yourself having to make amends or feeling guilty. And when you don't feel guilty, you're not trying, when the phone rings and you answer it without checking who's calling, when the letter comes in and you open it up without ripping it up, I don't care who it's from, what happens is when you're living a life where, when you don't when you don't see somebody in a store and walk out saying, gee, I hope he didn't see me. When you stop living a life where you're feeling guilty, a guilty life, which you can live a guilty life. So when you stop doing that, what happens is you stop feeling guilty. And also what happens is the voices stop. The voices stop. The voices stop. I'm telling you, the voices will stop. And not only will the voices stop, but you might start thinking good things about yourself. I know this is hard to believe. You go from, I'm such a piece of crap, I'm such a phony, and you say to yourself things like, you're not such a bad guy. You're okay, Russ. You're trying to do what God's trying to do. You start saying, and when that happens, you start experiencing something called the joy of living. Now, the problem with experiencing the joy of living, there's a downside. No, this is the downside. It's not that bad. It's when you live your life. Now, I'm going to tell you something. It's not perfect. Because every once in a while, the voice comes in and says, you're such a piece of shit. But it always comes in when I've said something I shouldn't have said. And I know how to fix it. I fix it. I don't even have to write it down. You know what I mean? The voice comes in. I said, it's because you did. I pick up the phone. I make amends. I get rid of it real fast, Because it's almost like, I don't want to call it brainwashing. It's learning how to rethink differently than an alcoholic. But it doesn't happen. You can't think like an alcoholic, like the way we think, for 31 years. And thinking that way, really, maybe for 10 years out, you can't think of that way, and all of a sudden turn it around on a dime. You know what I mean? You take the 12, and all of a sudden you turn it around. Now, that stuff goes on and on and on. You know, somehow down the road, you learn restraint of tongue and pen. And now, all of a sudden, the voices stop. And you're feeling decent about yourself. And you're at peace. You might even be rocking in the fourth dimension here and there, and all that sort of stuff. But then the problem comes when they ask you to go to a meeting, and you got to talk about the eighth and ninth step. And you don't even want to talk about them. You want to talk about how great it is when you get to a point where you're not feeling like a piece of crap, and you're not guilty. You understand what I'm saying? But you got to do it. You're forced to do it because you realize that there are people that are hurting in that area, and they're dying in that area. And they're going to end up doing it, but they're not even sure why they're doing it. And I can tell you this, I think alcoholics want to feel good. My sponsor said to me, one of the first things he said to me, our first sponsor, he says, Russ, you never have to drink again, and you never have to feel the way you feel ever again. And I didn't want to feel the way I felt. And I didn't know how to stop feeling the way I felt. I stopped drinking. I'm a white chip wonder. I stopped drinking right away. I haven't had a drink, and I'm in my 40s. I haven't drank, but the feelings, the feeling of inadequacy or being a phony or feeling guilty, the feelings, and I'm telling you something, they don't go away, like immediately or after 5 years. I mean, they're there, I don't want to live anymore with groups of people in my brain. I mean, I don't know when it was, but one day when I was 5 or 6, I realized that I had like 20, 30 people floating around in my brain. You know what I mean? That all I did was I think of this one, then I think of that one, I think of this one, I think of that one. They're like, they were living rent-free in my brain. It was all bad things. I'm thinking bad things about them and other people because of situations or things, and that I hadn't made amends or whatever the heck it is. And sometimes what happens is when you get a little long in the tooth, whether it be 5 or 6 or 7 years, and you're doing all this stuff, and you're actually doing AA, you feel like you shouldn't think that way, and you're feeling you have that intellectual pride that you don't really want to go and tell your group or anybody that you're feeling that way because you think you should be able to handle it. You think I should be able to handle this. I don't really have to talk to anybody about this. I don't have to tell them how I'm feeling or anything like that. I can handle this deal, and you can't handle it, So I like talking to people about this stuff just in case there's somebody who's experienced this stuff and they think they can handle it, and I want them to think they're not that crazy. They're not crazy. It's part of the deal as far as growing up. So they're not drinking, going to meetings, but the 8th step and the 9th step, that's why it's important. But if you continue to do it, what ultimately happens is over a period of time, the voices will go away. You'll stop feeling inferior. You'll stop looking for things to put in your life to make you okay. That kind of thing. Whatever it is that you're trying to figure out to make you okay, because you probably are okay. You just got to get rid of that thinking. So I haven't talked so much about the 9th step, but all I can say about the 9th step, and I'm going to throw it in, is I can tell you various 9th steps I've done, but most people pretty understand that sort of stuff. One classic 1 minute 9th step. Well, there's a lot of different, but I'll tell you the one thing about the 9th step is check with your sponsor, because you'll come up with some sort of idea that might not be a good idea, and I remember, when I hurt my wife, my first wife, tremendously, which I won't go into the whole story. A lot of you have heard that story. And I basically was an insensitive person, and my wife was a loyal, wonderful young lady, and she only made one mistake in her life, and that was marrying me, and that was it, truly, because I was a selfish bastard, and I didn't care about anybody except myself, and I hurt her tremendously. And my amends, and I got to, and my first wife was in the hospital with a very serious problem, and I went up there. I sat down with her and I had a long talk with her about how I had hurt her and how I was wrong. I went through the whole deal with her and explained everything. And she said to me, I thought maybe I was wrong. I was a bad wife. And I said, absolutely not. I said, you want to know something? The best thing you did was get rid of me, because if I was allowed to continue the way I was going, we would have never been able to even talk this way, because that's how selfish and self-centered I was. You were a great wife. You were fantastic. And of course, after that, it doesn't stop. You have to keep on being a decent person. We had a son and child, so you got to make sure you're just decent. And to this day, I want to tell you something. The one thing I that I disagree with Bill Wilson about, but he only had 3.5 years. So I'm serious. When you get a lot of time, you're going to find out something, that there are some things that are going on that conflict with they tell you. When he says, you will not regret your past or wish to shut you will not regret. I will, till the day I die, I will regret how I treated my ex-wife. You don't rip somebody's heart out and stomp it on the ground and throw them over a cliff and shoot them and then say, I'm sorry, or whatever it is, or do whatever amends. And then you say, well, I'm okay now. You know something? So I had to come to grips with how come I did all the amends and everything like that, and we talked together and we have good feelings and everything, and how come I still regret it? And I said, and I say to myself, Russell, what kind of person do you think you would be if you didn't regret? Would you ever trust a person who had that story but didn't regret it? You ever think that God allowed this thorn to be in your side about regretting how you picked, so that you would realize and come to realize that how important it was to have God in your life? Because if you didn't have God in your life and you didn't do these things, you could turn right back into that person. Do you ever think that maybe God allowed you to have that regret in that stabbing pain in your heart, the way you hurt somebody, so that you would not get cocky about this stuff or start thinking what a great guy you are and how wonderful you are? You know something? I thank God for the regrets I have in my life. I don't sit around and say, look at all the meetings I go to and everything like that. Look how wonderful I am in Alcoholics Anonymous. Let me tell you something. I'm an evil son of a, listen, you may be one of these guys that you're spiritual, not religious, you're very spiritual. I'm not spiritual. I'm an evil son of a, without God in my life, without focusing on him, without helping them, I'm one evil bastard. And I have no doubt that without God, if I was left to my own devices, I started thinking I was okay. So listen, I thank God for my regrets, my regrets. And you know something? God's grace has given me the ability to live my life and help other people and feel relatively good about myself, even with the regrets. So it's not the end of the world. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. But, for the most part, the voices are gone, except every once in a while they come up, and it's usually because I did something to somebody and I have to make an amends, and I know how to do that because I've been doing them for a long time. I'm not gonna live with that stuff anymore. With people rent-free in my head. I can't deal with that, so, I know how to get rid of them. And I know it's like a giant neon sign. As soon as I start saying to myself, well, he said that and she said that and blah, blah, blah. As soon as I start that debating society about, redoing the argument I had or whatever it is, man, I realize, I screwed up. I got to do something right. I got to straighten it out. But it doesn't happen that much because, you do, restrain tongue and pen. You do find yourself, before you're about to say something, I have that story that I tell about my wife and the pressure cleaner. If you had do the story. So I walked out of my bedroom. This happened like a year and a half ago. And my wife, we've been married for 45 years, 46. My wife comes in from outside with a giant pressure cleaner in a box. And I'm looking at it. You could tell Price is Right. I said, man, that's $400 or $500 right there. So I'm trying to go out there and earn some money. I'm already $500 in the hole. I mean, I know it. So I say, oh, you brought a pressure cleaner. He says, yeah, for the backyard, I bought a pressure cleaner. I said, oh, okay. And then she goes outside again and she walks in with a second pressure cleaner. Exactly, the exact same thing. So I say to her, this is a true story. You can't make this shit up. I said, let's say you bought two. And she says, yeah, I bought two. I'm $1,000 in the hole. You know, I actually work for a living. You know what I mean? I don't know what she thinks that I pick money off the money tree or something. You know, that's, so I said, so you bought two? She says, yeah, I bought two. So I say, I don't know what you would have done. I say, why did you buy two? You know, you need to get married as soon as possible. You're having too good of a time. I said, why'd you get two? And she says, because I wanted two. You think I'm making this stuff up? This is the kind of stuff that you're going to be dealing with in your life. People like this, you know what I mean? People who should be executed on the spot, you know what I mean? So I'm about to say, and let me tell you something, I didn't do anything wrong here. I didn't deserve this shit, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I'm about to say the next question, which had the F word in it, you know what I mean? Like, why the, you know what I mean? And before I even say it, the Lord comes in. I'm a Jesus guy. The Lord comes in and captures that thought. And I replace it with another thought, and this is what I hear. Here's the voice I hear. Russell, you've just gotten the best answer you're ever going to get from this woman. You ain't going to get another answer. It's going to be, whatever answer you're going to get, it's not going to be good. It's not going to end well. So I just smile and I walk away. I just walk away, you know, and restrain a tongue and pen, you know, with the help of the Lord. And then 3 days later, I'm outside in the backyard. I've got a bunch of my guys there, thank God, as witnesses to this. Witnesses. I got witnesses to this. And I'm about to start a workshop or something like that. And she's in the backyard, she's there with the pressure cleaner. And she's just standing there with it. I said, what's going on? He says, the pressure cleaner is broken. It's not working. I said, well, let's just get the other pressure cleaner. She says, I knew you wouldn't let it go. I knew you couldn't let it go. You had to bring it up again, didn't you? She said, well, for your answer, I got it from my cousin. It wasn't even from me, you see, but you couldn't let it go. And I started laughing. I said, what are you going to do? I started laughing. I said, thank God I got witnesses so they can see the real deal that I'm, you know, I got my witnesses. And then I said, isn't this great? This will be a great story in Alcoholics. And I've been telling this story all over the world. I've told it to large groups at conventions with my wife sitting there. And she can't say a flipping thing. You know what I mean? Because she knows I have witnesses. She can't say that never happened or anything like that because I got witnesses, you know? So thank you, guys. Appreciate it.